Where shall I sit? Shall I sit on the end there?
Spread out my paper a bit. That's all right.
We're all sat on our own seats separately.
Quite comfy, you could just relax.
What an inspiring talk there by Peter Korn. That was fantastic, wasn't it? Yeah, round of applause for Peter. How are you all doing? I'm aware it's, what time is it? 4. It's been a long day, but super inspired? Yes? Good. Looking forward to the party? Good. Not long now. Okay. So I just want to give my amazing panelists a little opportunity to introduce yourselves. So who should we start with? Who wants to go first?
Me?
Cleve, go on.
You're looking at me very suspiciously. Yeah, my name's Cleve West. I'm a garden designer since 1990 when I did a course at Kew with John Brooks, only a 5-week course. Yeah, just been building gardens ever since then. I used to build them myself, but then I got more work as a garden designer. Also, around about 2000, took over an allotment in Bushy Park, and that is where we have all our best days. That's where I really want to be most of the time. And we have a no-kill policy down there, so we've never ever sort of killed insects or anything, basically. Never used any pesticides. So gardened organically since then. And since 2015, I've been vegan, so I'm looking at exploring the veganic way of gardening, which is quite interesting. It's got its challenges, but it's very interesting. Yeah, so that's it. And how it applies to actual garden design is it's work in progress, let's put it that way.
Okay, Sheila.
I'm Sheila Das, garden manager at RHS Garden Wisley, where I've been for 9 years, following being at English Heritage Kew and other things. I look after edible growing at Wisley, our wellbeing garden, our member seed scheme, and our training programs in the garden, so our practical learners in the garden. So I have all the best kind of growing and nurturing bits of Wisley, I think. If any of you have been to Wisley in the last few years, you will know that we're undertaking a bit of a rejuvenation of our edible growing approach, and that's very sort of at the core of my passions in horticulture, growing good, healthy, nutritious food in a way that doesn't cause harm to our environment. And I'm extremely passionate and excited about what we're doing at Wisley, and it's been a brilliant day today, which I think keys into a lot of the things that we're doing. So that's me.
Fantastic. Last but not least.
Hi, my name's Owen Heyman. I'm Owen the Gardener on Instagram. Some of you might have seen my allotment on there. So I'm one of the landscape managers at Pictorial Meadows in Sheffield. So we're a social enterprise. We're a big commercial landscape contractor. We do projects all across the UK. Nigel Dunnett started the company many years ago, and we're run by the Green Estate. On Saturday, I'll be doing a talk. Hopefully, lots of you will be there, and I can tell you about our public projects. I've been in horticulture for about 7 years. I did the Wisley Diploma with Sheila, and well, she wasn't on it with me, she was running it. And I have a background in environmental science research, so I used to work at the University of Sheffield. I worked on a lot of stuff to do with no-till agriculture, what we now call regenerative agriculture. It wasn't really called that at the time. And I also worked a lot in natural ecosystems, in tropical forests, looking at legume trees. It was all about plant-soil atmosphere interactions. And then I did quite a bit of research on geoengineering, which is the conscious manipulation of global climate for good effect, using plants and soils. And that obviously comes with a whole bunch of ethical challenges around it, you know, the global manipulation of global climate. So I'm quite interested in these ethical dilemmas. And then while I was at Wisley, I did my dissertation on glyphosate. I was really interested in looking at the positives and negatives for human health, for wildlife, and for environment broadly. And I wrote a 103-page dissertation, and I've got a copy if you really want to have a great time at the party tonight. You're welcome to borrow it.
He'll be doing a reading after the party tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, so what a panel. I'm going to kick off with my first question. So we're more aware now than ever before about the vital importance of the soil microbiome, the collective communities of microorganisms found in the soil, including bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes. and a whole array of other organisms within the soil. So their crucial role in fueling plant growth, productivity, nutrient uptake. If we were to summarize now how some of our horticultural actions sort of break and disrupt the balance of the soil microbiome, what would they be? It's quite a question. Who wants to kick it off?
All right, I'll start.
Reluctantly.
Reluctantly. My head's actually exploding from all the information that's been put out today. I think the biggest thing, being an organic gardener, is, I've read it's a very compelling argument, Owen's dissertation, but I still wouldn't use pesticides and herbicides. Not just because of what they do to the microbiome, but also what they do to insects. I just don't want them harmed at all. So I've obviously not done that down at the allotment, and trying to get clients not to use those chemicals is more of a challenge. Obviously, I do have a certain influence, but not as much as you'd think, which is slightly annoying. Probably because of my personality, I'm not really good at engaging with bull-headed clients who have got lots of money and want everything done yesterday. So that's always going to be a bit of a challenge, I think. I don't think that's going to change much. But yeah, I'm very interested in Owen's dissertation because, a lot to do. The big thing, of course, is time and money, which if you're working for someone else, that's always a major factor. So yeah, I'm interested in the whole debate. But for me, I'm sticking to being organic and veganic from now on.
Cool. I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about being a veganic gardener. What does that mean?
Veganic gardening, well, basically it's based on the ethos of being, it's a combination of two words, vegan and organic. So it's based on the ethos of being vegan, where you don't actually have any animal inputs. So there's a guy called Ian Tolhurst who he works at the Hardwick estate near Reading, near Whitchurch, and he's been producing food for 40 years, and in the last 30 years, I think, at the Hardwick estate. And his productivity on quite average soil, grade 3, I think it is, has risen exponentially over the years from not having any animal inputs. It's a closed-loop system. Well, actually, it may be a closed-loop system now, but he used to get ramial wood chip. That's wood chip derived from branch wood that's no bigger than 7 centimeters in diameter. So it has a good nitrogen-carbon content ratio. So he's been experimenting with wood chip where it's put into windrows and composted, so that's green waste, and he gets it from a reliable source, someone he can trust, so you can know the provenance and the fact that it's not contaminated. He's also lately using wood chip in its raw state, just spreading it on the ground, something like, I think I'm right in saying it's about 7 litres per square metre. So it's not much, really. And he's actually saying that there is a danger of overdoing it with fertilizer. You don't actually need that much. And he's on that fairly average soil as well. So he does those two, like green manure, green waste, composted waste, the wood chip. He also does green manure. He also grows green manure with plants that are growing once they get to a certain size. He also uses allows weeds to grow once the crops get to a certain size. He does no-till, and he still does some crop rotation as well. So he pretty much covers all bases. And the production there is off the charts. So he's actually got the template for moving away from animal agriculture, which is quite fascinating.
Well, hopefully that will pop back up in some of our sort of discussion. Sheila, what processes are breaking the connections?
Well, obviously, I'm going to say it. Anyone who knows me, digging.
Okay.
I've developed fondness for soil over the years. But interestingly, and I think this is a really important point to make, not being purist about it. So My own personal no-dig journey started with one Mr. Dowding in a lecture theatre in Kew in January 2011, and I haven't looked back since. And I would say there have been times along that journey when I've been like, thou shalt not dig, or you know, the fires will open up and swallow you. But actually, and you know, talking to people like Ian and various other people and getting, you know, just assimilating information slowly over time and understanding that there are times where disturbance is even important. So coming back to that whole kind of natural system and thinking that for me, the no-dig is just not doing the whole kind of dig out a trench, put in the compost and the Victorian style of digging. You know, that's the thing that I think we really need to stop doing. But actually it's totally about just changing your way of thinking and about working with processes that do something positive so that don't destruct things. So sometimes, yes, you will disturb, but not disturb at a deep level either. So we've been talking a lot about fungal activity and mycorrhizae and soil networks today, and they're a lot kind of deeper than that surface. And if you think about the surface of soil, you know, animals walk on soil, things scuff things up, humans walk on soil, it's okay, you know, so... but actually that routine digging is a fundamental that we've certainly in the type of horticulture we do at the RHS, we've been really trying to speak to people about. Can be interesting, but I just like digging comment comes quite a lot. So I think that's something that's worth talking about, actually, when we get to talk about our place in the system.
Sort of old school practice, but it's been removed from the new RHS curriculum, hasn't it? The double dig it. I'm pretty sure it has.
There will be people in this room who will say that they've been asked to, on a level 2, to do in the practical to do double digging. So it's actually still a little bit of a challenge because colleges deliver the qualification. We can talk about things in it, but there's still a lot of work to do in the way we deliver horticultural education.
Okay. All right.
But the intention is there, everybody.
Okay. Owen.
Yeah,
add anything?
I would say soil health to me is kind of thinking about is the soil doing what we would hope it to do? So we don't want soil to be eroding. No. And so, you know, cultivation of soils, as you say, or keeping soils bare over winter in particular, causes a lot of erosion, has downstream effects in rivers, you know, and then things like carbon emissions from soils. Obviously, that's not something that we would be able to see or would necessarily be able to measure ourselves. But we would hope that soils broadly would be net sinks of carbon over time. And we also want our soils to be able to grow a wide range of plants. And if we're adding a lot of nutrients and inputs, and even like we talked a bit about organic inputs versus inorganic nutrients, you know, if people are adding manure year on year to their soils, that's still a lot of nutrients. It's still going to cause a lot of problem for mycorrhizal fungi, and it's going to cause this big surplus of nutrients that means that it's really difficult to maintain that high diversity, intricate type planting that we all love. I mean, we're thinking a lot about the planted areas of gardens because we're all gardeners and we love plants and that's the bit we focus on. But most people's gardens actually have a very small part of planting, if any. And actually it's driveways, paving, hot tub, fake grass, lawn, and lawn. Even a lawn managed organically could be pretty environmentally, you know, not great. It's just mown all the time. It's a bit of a green desert. So yeah, I would say, think about those kind of bigger things.
Brilliant. Okay. So how do we view our role alongside all of the biodiversity at play in our gardens? How do we avoid demonising our presence and our actions in the garden? We start with you, Sheila.
I've had lots of thoughts about this today, and I'm getting my little notebook out because, like Cleve said, your head explodes, doesn't it? You come on a day like today, and you get presented with loads of amazing information. And we have demonised ourselves in this system, and I'm always interested when we talk about anthropomorphizing what we do, because there's a suggestion, therefore, that we're not part of this. We're not part of this. We're here, everything else is over there. And that's where it starts for me.
The disconnection.
Yeah, that disconnection. And I just scribbled down some of the things that I thought, okay, I've come to this amazing conference. I've listened to the most amazing speakers. I've got to go away and do this now, and I feel like my head's going to explode. I want to think like a fungus. I want to live like sphagnum. I want to know how much carbon is absorbed in my soil. I want to be aware of bioregionality, regenerative principles and local variation. I want to think about ecosystem services in terms of what things can do for my ecosystem. I want to be aware of microbial characteristics. I then got on to thinking, what would an RHS plant finder plant profile look like after this conference? So, in adding, you want a moist yet well-drained soil, which they all say, I'd have to add, and the pH, and light shade or not, I'd have to add the root characteristics that Noel was talking about in all their forms, so that's broader than annual and perennial, any fungal preferences that we've got, any microbial mates that they've got, or microbial enemies apparently, the stomatal type, oh my word, down to the stomatal type, how much carbon do we sequester, what about climate variability? I'm going to put the book down. Woo!
How do we do all of that?
How do we deal with that? So seriously, guys, it's amazing. What we do is we want to be like a peat bog, don't we? We want to just hold that. We don't have to suck it up like a sponge. We don't have to be a sponge, but we want to hold it and live alongside it. So remember that we are part of the system. Go away. Every time you absorb all of this information, you become richer. Subconsciously, you become richer and you'll start to see things. And I know some of you have talked to me about a talk I did earlier in the year at the London Gardens Network, where I talked about celebrating our sixth sense in the garden. And that's about so much of what we do in horticulture. Talks about what we're used to having. So, you know, as Owen's just referenced, we're all gardeners and we like this intensity of planting. But we've got habitual with that. So we think this is what we want, and we're constantly trying to work out how to get there, instead of thinking, this is where I am, what can I have? And celebrating that. And if you engage that sixth sense and start to converse with your environment, now I talk a lot about soil, but equally amazing what we've just heard from Peter about everything else that you can do with different substrates and everything. Ian Tolhurst talks about soil obesity. We overfeed things. Everything is kind of as lush and as perfect as it can be. But just mindset, flip it on its head. Think about what can my site give me, and work from there, really. But that's with having absorbed all of this amazing information, but don't get bogged down in it. Converse, have a conversation with your landscape.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Cleve, how can we avoid demonising ourselves? Tell me.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, when I first went vegan, I was like, just did it because our family is largely, most of them are vegan, and the children all went vegan, and started learning from them. And so we did it just to support them to begin with. And then I started looking into the animal agriculture industry, and it was so shocking, it literally silenced me for about 3 months. I literally couldn't operate. And I remember there was one point where I was getting ready for doing a garden at Chelsea, and we had to go and make some space to put some pallets of some materials somewhere in the yard. And this guy got and leapt into a digger, and he just got this biggest digger you could ever imagine. Just went and dug a whole bank of blackberries, and just pushed it all out of the way, leveled it off, and said, "Yeah, I'll stick it there." And my stomach lurched, thinking about everything that was in that bucket, basically, or several buckets. So, and then it started affecting my work. I started thinking, I don't actually want to do anything, you know. It's really, I was frozen to the spot. But then I started looking at, I've got a lot of information from people like Sarah Wilson. Sarah Wilson's podcast, Roots and All podcast, is amazing. If anyone doesn't know about that, get onto that. There's about 301 episodes now. There's so much information on there. And a lot about regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture. And got to know people like John Little, Benny Hawksby, and learning about disturbance and the natural processes. Charlie Harper over at Net Farm, understanding that we are part of the system, we are part of nature, we do disturb things, and accepting that. That doesn't mean it's like a green light to just go and get in that digger again and just clear a bit of space and damage a load of stuff, just put a pallet there. But it just makes you a lot more considered. I mean, during that time when I was frozen, you would never have wanted to employ me on an hourly rate, that's for sure. But I've sort of come to terms with it a little bit more now, and hopefully I think I'm a better person for it, a more compassionate person. But you have to be realistic as well. I mean, you can't walk out the door without treading on an ant or something, or a slug this year.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it definitely feels like we need to trust our guts, trust our instincts.
yeah.
And we generally want to do the right thing, don't we? Owen, I wonder if you've got anything to...
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, yeah, what was the question? How do we not vilify ourselves?
Yeah.
I think to some extent we do need to be honest about the fact that we can't do everything perfectly, and when people are not doing things perfectly, you know, we can be compassionate with them and know that they often try to do their best. You know, we were talking about peat earlier. At work, we do huge planting projects, hundreds of thousands of plants. We always try and get peat-free. We always try and call around and source peat-free plants. It's very rarely possible to get everything peat-free. If it does come, they're often in a whole range of different types of composts that then make it really difficult to manage those plants. Even when they're planted, they all perform really differently. So we do try and do contract grown, but that's really, again, that's difficult, and we need plenty of lead time beforehand, and often the projects, even though we tell them, look, you need to let us know 2 years in advance, that's never what happens. So, yeah, you know, we can always try our best, and but often we fall short, and we just need to kind of be compassionate with each other about that. But I was just going to say, in terms of, you know, human impact on ecosystem, there's, you know, savannas, meadows, wood pastures, and a lot of fire-managed Australian habitats. Those are human, you know, they're semi-kind of man-made ecosystems that have existed for, you know, thousands of years. They're some of the world's most important ecosystems, and they are partly human-derived. And when humans kind of started doing that, they didn't do it with the same knowledge that we have today necessarily. You know, it's a little bit like at Dixter. It's amazing for biodiversity, but beauty was always there. They were looking for beauty, and actually biodiversity was a byproduct of it. So sometimes the intention is, you know, you end up with something else. So, and that can be a really positive thing. So I'm just kind of saying, in urban environments, there are these kind of weird mongrel, native, non-native, novel ecosystems that are quite fascinating, and they actually do provide a lot of ecosystem services. And, you know, we can really see we are obviously a really important part in that. And we make decisions actively, but also we have an impact through our ignorance. And you know, by not doing something, you also have an impact. So, and I broadly say, if we can, the more we know and the better decisions we make. So I think that feeling of, it's all too complicated and humans are just bad, I'm just going to not do anything, itself is probably quite damaging and problematic.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the complexity and the chaos of it all that seems to be so vitally important.
Yeah.
When we dominate over it or create a monoculture, you know, we find success in that. Like, that's where we're sort of heading down.
Eddie referred to muddle earlier as well, and that the muddle in evolution is really, really important. There is chaos in nature, and it is really, really important, isn't it?
There was a lovely Merlin said about the fungi, that they're improvising and they're problem solving in a wild place. And I thought, that's us, man. That, you know, the world, urban places, everything, it's all wild. We're wild. We're improvising and we're problem solving in a wild place. And, you know, and all this research we're doing on fungi, they're constantly evolving. So that research is instantly out of date, almost. You know, that's the world we're in.
I also really liked Merlin's comment about what sort of dance partner we should all be. I thought that was fantastic, because we all dance differently, and maybe you'll see some of my moves later tonight.
Start with a slow waltz, slow it down, and then you can get to the, you know,
that's the key.
tearing it up.
Okay, next question. So it seems to me that in order to be good custodians of the land that we work with, we need to develop a love for it. Without connection, there can be no relationship, and without relationship, there is no care. My question to each of you is, how do we connect and how do we foster better connections with the land and the environment around us? We start with you.
Yeah, I think, you know, people find connection in lots of different ways. Obviously, beauty and, you know, the visual experiences, or the kind of atmospheric, you know, experiences that we might see, you know, raindrops on a plant, or the sun lighting things up, or, you know, flowers or foliage. But there's also obviously food, and that might come through food growing or foraging, or learning about, you know, edible, medicinal, or, you know, material uses of plants. I think, yeah, but there's also, obviously wildlife and people who are getting into entomology or birds and that then getting you interested in the environment. I'm quite involved in outdoor swimming and outdoor swimming access campaigning, and there's been a really interesting journey with that, where for years, actually, rivers were obviously extremely polluted coming out of the Industrial Revolution. And then people said, broadly speaking, we actually started to think rivers are quite clean, and the Outdoor Swimming Society, who I'm part of, were saying, actually, rivers are pretty good, we can all go swimming in rivers again. And then actually all those people getting back into rivers had a fairly good time, but then they also started to become really aware of the sewage pollution that we're now all really aware of, and is now like a big story in the media. But before that, no one had paid any attention to the sewage because no one was at the rivers, because everyone just thought the rivers are dirty, filthy places, we're not going to go to them. So there's a bit of a thing of people need to know that that nature and wildlife and parks and urban spaces are fascinating places and that you should go and look at them. They're not necessarily just nature devoid, herbicide-covered deserts. That actually there's lots to see there, and when you get there, we'll be more engaged. And then collectively as a society, you've got all those more people who are observing, noticing things, raising the alarm when there's problems, wanting to conserve, wanting to increase species richness. So I think, just getting people involved. So with the rivers, it was get people in the river, and then they were able to defend it against sewage pollution.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the connection and access feels so important. And you mentioned rivers just now, you mentioned parks, you mentioned gardens, and what I want to throw into the mix as well, and I'm giving a talk on Saturday too, about brownfield and my particular relationship with a place that I've been visiting for the last 10 years. And brownfield sites are really important, to connect with important because of biodiversity and all the rest of that. However, they were really important for me and friends of mine in connecting with a landscape, being able to go and dig and be a bit feral. And in gardens, we've got to walk in hushed tones. In parks, we've got to behave in a certain way. But I want to sit in Merlin's hole and dig as a kid. That's where connections are made in my mind. But sorry, I'll throw that question over to you.
But gardening as an activity, I'm going to say this, I work for the RHS. Everybody go out and garden, that's the way to connect. But seriously, it is, isn't it? It's an actual physical connection. We've talked today about getting your hands in there and actually touching it. And it's moving away from this visual, tidying up. Everything's got to look a certain way and present a facade. And people have been shocked when they've come to Wisley and they've seen what we've done in the orchard. They're like, oh my God, I didn't realise you were doing this. I knew you were doing something, I didn't realise you were doing this. Because it's an entirely different visual aesthetic, but then when you walk through it, you feel something different. Owen made a good point. I'm going to obviously say food is a massive connector. If you could get somebody to grow one piece of food for themselves, this is how you start to unlock the conversation about caring about food and how it grows and what understanding it more and having a connection.
And how it all connects back to us as well. We're involved in that connection. Right?
Somebody referred earlier to as well about education and with children. And I think what's really fascinating with children is we don't need to tell them. They already know. So we had a great example once in the World Food Garden at Wisley where a child was messing around in the beds, shock horror, in the RHS World Food Garden. And a parent says, dad says to the boy, get out the dirt, Jimmy, or whatever his name was. And Jimmy turns around and goes, it's not dirt, it's soil. He knew that. He knew that. What we do is we then put a lid on it. So if we can just allow that to still express itself, I think that could be a really powerful way forward with young people, definitely.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
Good old Jimmy. Yeah. I don't know what his name was.
Cleve, any other ways that we can foster better connections?
Yeah, I'll get onto that in a sec, but I'm going to sound like a broken record by the end of the day. That is right up my street. I helped a primary school in Battersea, and they any of the new children coming in at the age of 4 are given a trowel and a spade and little toy implements, and they're introduced to garden on day 1. They're taught to respect all life. Headmistress or head teacher there tells them not to kill anything. They understand why. It's all interconnected. They're learning that at the age of 4, which is amazing. They haven't done since COVID, it stopped around the COVID, but before that, we had 2 or 3 groups come to our allotment so it's almost like an exchange visit. which was absolutely fantastic. They learned so much. They actually knew a lot that most children don't know about growing vegetables and about insects and wildlife, which was great. So, yeah, connections. Food, definitely. Young children, absolutely essential, because food is going to become a really important issue at some point. And just to harp back on about the veganic thing, you know, so much land is used for animal agriculture. We need to see a shift towards plant-based agriculture. Plant-based movement is growing, not quick enough as far as I'm concerned. Something like oh, hang on, I've got it on here. I've got David Attenborough, no less, has been talking about it. So if we shift away from eating meat and dairy and move toward plant-based diet, we could still produce enough to feed us, but do so using a quarter of the land. Year after year, we clear over 2 million hectares of the Amazon forest. We use nearly all of it to make space for cattle and to grow soya to feed livestock. Currently, the vast majority of agricultural land, more than 75%, is used to raise livestock, and this is very inefficient. 70 billion animals killed each year. So if we shift away from eating meat and dairy and move towards plant-based diet, this could free up an area the size of the United States, China, European Union, and Australia combined. That's from David Attenborough. You know, it's not me just banging my vegan drum. So,
Bang it.
yeah, bang it. I'm banging it. Yeah, I'm banging it. But no, seriously, it's a. You know, all this introspection and hand-wringing about what can we do. You know, there's no insects anyway. I mean, last night, every person I talked about, that was the main topic of conversation. Where are the insects? You know, I got bitten by a mosquito last night. That's the first time I've been bitten this year. You know?
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, there is also somewhere in between with the, you know.
Yeah.
So I, for example, I'm not vegan. I'm not vegetarian. I eat meat. But I make an active choice to buy less, to eat less meat, to buy well-produced, sustainably produced, organic meat when I can. But it's often about privilege as well. You know,
we've all got that privilege in the UK, at least. I know that in some countries that's difficult, but in the UK and the Western world, by and large, we've all got the same privilege, because that food, plant-based whole food, is cheaper than meat and dairy and eggs and fish. And it doesn't cause half the trouble. So yeah, it's been demonized in a way by the meat industry because it makes you out to be, I don't know, an ultra lefty extremist. And all you're doing is it's a passive act, basically. You're standing away from violence, basically, to innocent animals. That's all it is. I mean, there isn't a word why we have to actually be called vegan. That's the weirdest thing, because you wouldn't call someone a non-racist or a non-homophobe or a non-transphobe. You're taking away from that system of oppression. Thank you.
Sheila, you were going to say
I was
something.
only just going to point out, but it comes back to that, how do we reconnect to nature? And I know we're pushed for time now, but the first time, I would say, as a grown-up, that I felt I was standing in a natural environment was when I went to NEP. So if we start talking about animals in a system and starting to actually understand how the natural system works, we have to see and experience natural systems. So in that example, you know, where humans are playing the keystone species role and the animals are managed for their role in that system, if you are going to include that in your diet, for example, then understanding where and how that's come about, because there's an absence of natural process, is a much more positive, and it's about talking about things in a positive way. And I think sometimes the narrative around it becomes one of polarization and all of that. But actually, if you can celebrate that and we can just understand what we're talking about, because a lot of the time people will jump on a bandwagon and not understand what it is that they're talking about. So if anyone in this room hasn't been and stood in a natural landscape, NEP is a great place. Go there, because every time I go there, I kind of, thick pennies drop, you know. But when do we get the opportunity to actually stand in a landscape that is real? Very rarely, I think.
Can I just add to that, though? There's, because NEP still kills their animals, and they obviously make money from it. There are animal sanctuaries, and there are other places. There's a place I know, I don't think they want the publicity just yet, but they are managing it just like NEP, and they're going to have a herd of cows come in there to do the ruminating and all that stuff they do to make it all the magic happen, but they're not going to kill them. So, it is possible to do it. It just takes a bit of imagination and thought. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen tomorrow, unfortunately.
I want to try and squeeze in one more question. Can I? Yes? Good. Designing gardens and developing landscapes in a manner that mitigates biodiversity and habitat loss while creating spaces that are beautiful for people and bringing these projects in on budget can be a challenge. Working in this way can stretch the lead time, call for compromise in terms of an approach or material selection, and ultimately cost more. How do we convince our clients or stakeholders to adopt an innovative, contemporary, kinder design approaches? Owen.
Yeah, thanks. I think, a lot of the projects that we work on are often in some way public funded, but when you follow the money, it's basically public money, either through water companies or when we're doing flood resilience schemes or it's working for local councils. And so it's really important for us to deliver value for money to the public. And to deliver public benefits on as big a scale as possible. And obviously, as with anything in gardening, you're trying to maximize benefits and minimize harms. I think weighing up, this is a lot what we've been talking about with glyphosate, for example. It's weighing up the potential harms and the potential benefits. And so for example, when I asked Merlin the question earlier about, using glyphosate to spray off grass to create a meadow, I had a chat with him afterwards, and, we both were on the same page, really, that actually in some situations where you've got a set amount of money, and this is often what we have, we'll be like, here's 80 grand, we want as much meadows as we can get for that. And if we did it, we could do it by cultivating the ground, but it would be more expensive and the effects would be much less reliable. Or we could do it just by scarification of the ground. Again, it would be expensive and much less reliable, and as a result, the overall meadow area would be smaller, and those meadows would be much lower quality. And when you're working in environments where you can't always be there at exactly the right moment when the soil's just dry enough to cultivate and things like that. So you have to be very pragmatic, really, and actually delivering as big a project as possible. And obviously, glyphosate, there's lots to think about in terms of impact on wildlife, and we always take lots of action to minimize harm, using just the right amount at the right time of year. And so it's really about, and yet we are able to do these really big schemes.
This sounds so carefully done and so considered.
Yeah.
But I suppose if it's acceptable, then it's acceptable, right?
Yeah.
And we can't govern how it's going to be used. And that's often the problem, is that it's often used as that's the first thing that people grasp for.
Yeah. I think, I've chatted a bit to Guy Barter, who's at the RHS, and he's chief horticulturist at RHS, and he helps inform government policy on amateur use of pesticides. And glyphosate has just been renewed in the EU for 10 years. I don't think that we're ever going to be pesticide-free as a nation in terms of amateurs having access to them. I think people are always going to have access to some form of pesticide. And actually, there's 26 different active ingredients that are herbicides that you can buy as an amateur and use in your garden just for herbicides alone. And broadly speaking, some people here might disagree, but glyphosate is the least harmful. All of the other ones, I've got all the safety data in my dissertation if you want to read it. All of the other ones are much more problematic.
They're going to be queuing up.
Yeah, and people, if you take glyphosate off, people just go to the whole plethora and they'll use a cocktail of other chemicals because none of them basically are as effective and they're not whole spectrum, so you need to then use a range. So people will always use them, and I really think that you don't want to put people into a camp of, oh, you spray your drive, therefore you're not organic, you're not an environmental gardener, and then, and kind of put people into two camps and make it kind of territorial. I think a lot of people are going to spray their drive, and actually we just need to encourage those people to also have as diverse a garden as possible, to use as little herbicide as possible and think about how they use it. But broadly speaking, encouraging just having plenty of plants. I think you're already pretty much there. If you've got a whole range of plants, you've got some trees, you've got a diversity of perennial planting. And I think that's really the most important thing that we can be encouraging people to do, is to actually have plants. There's a lot of parts of this country. I'm sure that quite a lot of people here actually live in relatively wealthy areas where the gardens are really nice, but in a lot of the country, it's not like that. Gardens are pretty bare, and actually encouraging just planting. Get planting. Trees, shrubs, perennials.
Can I just add that?
Yes.
Just to be the counter to this is what our one-to-ones were like when Owen was a student. I would like to offer a hopeful aspiration that one day we will see the end of the use of these chemicals and the notion of control. Because we are not in control, we're part of a system, and the more we can do to encourage that, and that's what these conversations are, and we can share them as professional gardeners, we can share them through our gardens by setting a standard, by being authentic about our messaging and walking the talk. And if things take longer, they take longer. I have been involved in some big projects, and I would do things very differently now in the Wisley Hilltop project than I did them 5 years ago, because my knowledge has increased. I do agree that on some level, sometimes, if you're saying we're not going to do something completely as a one-off activity because it's going to kickstart something that has a huge benefit for a wide number of people, then there may be a case to make that justification. But I do think it's time now for large organisations, well-known organisations, to draw a line in the sand and say that as domestic gardeners, there's very little reason why you would need to do this. Do you need to do it? You don't need to do it. And we absolutely have to change our aspirations about what we want. We're trying to have the thing of yesterday. Let's have the thing of tomorrow, and then we can do it in a different way. It's the Einstein thing of we can't change our problems by using the thinking of the past. So that's my 2 pence.
Yeah, go on, please.
Couple of things. Firstly, I did a course with Jo McCurr recently at her wonderful garden, Learnt Lost. I mean, there's a lot, I think all of us agree, it's a lot to do with time and money. And that is really annoying, because some of the best gardens are when you plant, saplings like Jo has done, and just let time take its course and not be in a rush. But unfortunately, as a garden designer, I'm not in that position, because everyone wants everything yesterday.
The more people will understand, they'll rejoice in being part of that process, and that is enlivening.
The other thing, because I just dipped into your dissertation last night, and it says that, so it says 92% of glyphosate is used on arable land, is that right? Okay. And then 3% on outdoor veg, fruit and orchards, 4.6 on amenity, like railways and roads and stuff. Does that mean that 0.4% are used on gardens, domestic gardens? So that's all we're talking about. So again, to bang that vegan drum.
Is that domestic?
Yeah, so
domestic
it's actually 0.14% of our total
so it's not much
glyphosate use is what's used in gardens. So in total, in the UK, we use 2.4 thousand tonnes a year of the active compound glyphosate. Yeah. And of that, when I worked it out, it's about 1.7 tonnes is used in gardens. Yeah. And to just put that into context, so roughly at 0.14%.
Yeah. But my point
what was the percentage in agriculture again?
So it's 92% is on arable fields.
Yeah.
And on average, those fields that are sprayed on average, I think it's once a year, on average, once a year.
So if you imagine that, if we can reduce our arable land by 75, 3/4, you imagine how much reforesting, all the insects will come back, all the wilding will come back. Yeah. It's a no-brainer. I know it's not going to happen tomorrow. I know it's not, but that's the reality. Yeah. I mean, that's why we haven't got any. It's not really about gardeners using pesticides. The reason we haven't got any insects is agriculture.
Yeah.
Sorry. Come on, Hamira.
Come on, people.
Come on. Right, we're done.
Yeah.
Well, it's not finished, is it?
No, tomorrow.
It's not finished.
Tomorrow. We got Saturday. Don't worry.
We'll carry on this discussion, but let's make way for Hamira.
Thank you, everybody. Apparently, we have only been here for one day. I don't understand how we've done all this stuff. So me and Merlin chatted this morning. That was like days ago, right? And then after that, we had all those whistle-stop tour talks by Eddie, Noel, Tracy, Ellen. Incredible, like just so much to think about. And then we had all the panels, like the panel that I had with Merlin, Eddie and Lucy, and then Stephanie's panel with Tracy, Ellen and Noel, and then just now this incredible panel. I mean, that's like 1,000 years of knowledge and diversity there, so that's amazing. And just a couple of things like Alice, I just want to say, loved your talk. And somebody online gave you a standing ovation in their kitchen. So, you know, really incredible. Yeah. And I mean, the comedian who is Peter Korn, I mean, everything he says is funny, but so true. And like the nursery with no clients. I want a nursery with no clients. I just want to work with no clients. It's a brilliant thing. But anyway, what a lineup. Thank you so much, everybody. We're going to have a party, I think. I think there's been, oh, I've got to say something about Saturday. Don't forget there's like talks on Saturday for Errol and Owen. And there's a few other people, right? So just book those in. And then tomorrow morning, it is 8:45 back here for Dan Pearson. So yeah, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. Let's get out of here. Yeah.